Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're just waiting for people to join now. There's a few people joining. I can see all coming through online now. So we'll start in about 30 seconds or so. Right, we've got a good number of people logging in as we speak, so we'll be starting in just a moment. I can just see you all ticking over and entering the webinar, so welcome. Okay, I think we've got everybody now. Good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on retirement planning. My name is Justin Colley. I'm one of the business development managers of Australian Catholic Super. Today, I'll be presenting with Vivek Krishnan. He's one of our financial planners at Australian Catholic Super. And we'll be talking about planning for retirement, some of the things that you can do in retirement, the allocated pension, how it works, as well as we'll touch on some centre-linked benefits. And also some recent changes that will be coming into effect come July. Now, we've got an hour planned for today, so hopefully we can cover all the topics in that 1 hour. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat box or the Q&A box, which I'll be looking over to my other screen here and monitoring as we go along. And some questions may be personal, so if that's the case, we will get to you. One of your local RMs will call you in the next 24 hours or so to answer your question if we don't get a chance to answer it live today. And if some questions may be asked in advance of what we're going to be covering, so we won't answer them then and there, but hopefully we'll have some time at the end to get to questions. Also, this has been live streamed on the Facebook, on the Australian Catholic Super's webpage on Facebook, and you'll be able to go back and watch recordings of that if you so wish. At the end of today's seminar, or later on this afternoon, you will get a feedback form or a survey asking what you thought of today's webinar. So please complete that. And we'll also give you an opportunity there if you want to ask further questions, reach out to Vivek or the financial planning team and we can assist you further, but we'll talk about that towards the end of today's webinar. Before I start today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which I work and live and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and community. I repay respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Whenever we do a seminar or a webinar and go and talk to our members, we always have to give a disclaimer. Vivek will do this when he meets with people, I do it as well. Essentially, everything that we talk about today is general information. We're not taking into account your personal circumstances. Should you want personal advice that takes into account your personal circumstances, we suggest that you contact one of our financial planners and they'll be able to assist you. Now, many people approach retirement with many different retirement goals. I'm sure, Vivek, when you meet with members, they've got different goals and ideas that they want to do in retirement. I know a lot of people want to travel. That's probably been curtailed over the last 2 years, but starting to pick up again now. And I noticed just here in Sydney, the first cruise ship just came back in this week. I'm not too sure I'll be rushing to get a cruise just yet, but I know there's people who are dying to get back into those type of things. Vivek, do you just want to go through what a few of the retirement goals that you see when people meet with you?
Well, yes. So obviously, the most important thing here is that retirement is a big decision for most people. There's a lot of uncertainty and question marks and all of that. So the key thing is, of course, to help you think through what actually retirement means to you, because it's different for everyone. It might be cruises and travel for some. It might be just getting on with hobbies that you wanted to do things in the past and haven't been able to. So the key things are to think through what is retirement, what does it mean for you, and for us to try and understand. So this is where you want to go, and then to help you get there in a way that gives you a plan, brings about certainty, and most importantly, reduces the uncertainty and tensions that such a big change can bring about. So that's the basis of that initial discussion we always have.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's very important that you know how much super you do have, and knowing how much super is important, because at the end of the day, it's your money. You want to make sure that your employer is putting in the 10% contributions into superannuation in a timely manner. Those amounts will be increasing in the coming months, and we'll talk about that shortly. Working out, you may want to add more to your balance. You may come with some inheritance, have other investments that you want to crystallise and put into superannuation before you retire. Our financial planners can assist you as well in retirement planning, and just knowing all of these type of things really helps you know where you're heading in retirement and whether you're going to meet those desired goals of where you want to be. Vivek, ASFA, which is the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, they do a survey every quarter called the Retirement Standard, and they work out on how much you need for a comfortable lifestyle as well as a modest lifestyle, and compare that to the pension. Do you just want to go through that, please?
Yes, so this is the only sort of independent analysis that we find that sort of goes through a couple of standard scenarios for people and tries to put a number on what it is needed, because this is one of the most frequently asked questions from our members is, how much do I actually need to live on in retirement? So the ASFA survey goes into this assessment quarterly, and in this table, you can see that they've got a comparison with what the full age pension would get a single person or a couple. And then you'll see that the modest retirement goal that ASFA calculates would require quite a bit more than what the age pension would provide. So for a single, it's $29,000 and a bit. And for a couple, close to $42,000. That's the modest retirement. And we'll go into what these mean in a little bit. But when they talk about a comfortable retirement, they're talking about close to $46,000 for a single that they expect will be needed, and almost $65,000 for a couple. On their website, they've got a lot more information about what these amounts are made up of. They've got a budget breakdown on them as well, which this slide just talks about what it might mean, for example, from what sort of private health cover you may have, for example. In a comfortable lifestyle, it accounts for top-level health cover, including some extras possibly, but in a modest lifestyle, perhaps just basic cover and no cover for gaps, and with the age pension, just relying on the public system. So they go through a few things like that, but they've actually got budget numbers against each of these sort of headings for travel and all of that as well. So well worth a visit if you want to nut into the details of how they're calculating things and how it relates to you, because it won't be exactly the same for every member, but you can see how they're accounting for different things. And they do have a new website, I find out, and it's called superguru.com.au. So that's an easy one to remember. And if you go there, you'll find all the additional detail about how they do this calculation. And remember, it's updated every quarter. So it is keeping pace with changes in the cost of things and costs of living and all that.
Thanks, Vivek. I've just got up on the screen just some examples of what a comfortable and modest lifestyle, which is probably hard to read. But as Vivek said, we strongly recommend you to look at the ASFA website, or just Google the ASFA retirement standard, and it will come up. There's a little booklet you can download with about a dozen or so pages, which outlines all the different options and what makes up that modest lifestyle or the comfortable lifestyle. So it's a quite a little handy guide for you to be aware of. Now, but then when you look at meeting with our members and talking about their financial situation, I guess the biggest thing that you need to talk to members about is the sources that they have, what sort of resources they have behind them to retire. Do they have what types of investments? Did you just want to touch on that?
Yes. So, of course, super is the main asset which people think of in retirement, partly because the government has made it an attractive place to invest purely for your retirement, funding your retirement, but that's not the only asset that we can consider in considering how to fund your retirement needs. You could have liquid assets such as cash, more than you need as a reserve, for example, or shares, which may not be something that you want to hold on forever, and they could be used as well. But you could also have investment properties or even holiday homes in some cases, and depending on what your goals are, some people want to keep them for the enjoyment of family and friends for holiday homes. Others want to have investment properties go to their children. So depending on what your priorities are, we can look at what these assets can contribute towards your retirement. If you are going to hold on to investment properties, then of course they're going to provide hopefully rental income, and that can be factored in as a way to contribute to your living expenses. Or if you're going to sell it, then of course that's a lump sum that will be available for you to invest. And there's lots of moving parts to all of this, and we like to look at it as a holistic exercise and see where your priorities are to tap into these for funding your retirements. Now, one of the ones there you probably wouldn't have expected to see in this slide is the family home. And this is there because in reality, a lot of people, once they get older, find that living in a large house that was suitable for them to raise a family in is not necessarily what they need in retirement. Perhaps it's got floors that its staircases up and down, which make things tedious. Perhaps it's a lot of maintenance involved with gardens and gutters and all that. So downsizing from your existing home to something more manageable is often something people get into. The government is encouraging us to do that, and towards that end, if you do downsize, it opens up avenues for you to invest any excess money that you have into super if you wanted to. So the family house is definitely one of the moving parts in this whole equation. Doesn't have to be if you want to stay there because it's the right place for you to be in your 70s and 80s and 90s, well, then you hold on to it, but it's an option for you to consider.
Great, thanks for that. And the government's traditionally have made saving within super very tax beneficial. Or would you want to just touch on how superannuation is taxed?
Okay, so superannuation is a tax structure or a bucket which was set up for the purposes of encouraging us to save for our retirement. To provide the carrot for us to do that, the government said we're going to tax it at a concessional rate. So regardless of what your personal tax rate is, any money that goes into super as a concessional contribution, whether it's from your employer or yourself, is taxed at 15%. And for most people, that's lower than the tax they would pay on the top dollar. Not only does the money go in at a lower rate of tax, which means you've already clawed back some tax you would have paid, but it also affects the earnings of your money in the fund. So whatever you earn in the fund is also taxed at a lower rate. And this is true of super, as well as this in-between thing called a transition to retirement pension, which we'll come to in a bit, but that's something you can set up usually once you're over 60 for specific reasons. So these two structures have this 15% tax rate, but you can eventually move when you're in full retirement mode and once you qualify meeting the conditions into what's called an account-based pension or an income stream. And the beauty of it is that this is the closest we get in Australia to having a tax haven. There's no tax on your earnings. There's no tax on your withdrawals. It's completely accessible to you as a regular income if you want, or lump sums if you want. So these are the different tax structures or buckets, if you will, within super world that we can all use depending on what our path is in our life stage and what we want to do.
Right, and I guess one of the questions we get asked most often as an RM when you're out on the road, and I presume you get it as well, Vivek, is when can you access your superannuation to retire? I know it's a very common thing, and I know especially a lot of our members are in the education field and enjoy a well-earned break in school holidays, and I know this is what, the second last day of school holidays now, and people thinking, oh, if I go back to school next week, can I retire? I guess there's different ages of when people can retire or they get access to their money. You just want to touch on these different age brackets and what they mean to people?
Yeah. So first off, of course, you can retire whenever you want. What you can't do is access your super whenever you want. So when we're talking about access to your super, funding your retirement using super, that's what we're talking about. And what this is determined by is the unfortunate term called preservation age. When my wife, who's got nothing to do with finance, heard that term, she says, oh, you mean like it's pickled into something? And I said, no, it's just you don't have access to it until you meet certain rules. The short version of these rules, which have got simplified, but we're not quite there yet, is that you can't get to your money unless you're over 60 and retired. That's what it's heading towards, but we're still on the cusp of this transition. And as of this year and next, you can access your money if you've turned 58 or 59, depending on which part of the year you were born in. That is your preservation age. After that, after 2024, July, everyone will have a preservation age of 60, so you can access your super, provided you meet certain other conditions. Usually, the main one is you've retired after turning 60 and you don't intend to go back to work. So that's the 60 to 64 sort of phase where if you stop working permanently, you can access your super. And finally, there is a final age threshold for access to your money, and that's at age 65. So at age 65, all locks are taken away. You can access your super whether you're working or not, and there are no restrictions on it anymore. So for a year or two, it's still restricted to age 58, 59, but it'll soon be 60 for everyone. Now, this is just to do about access. It doesn't talk about what you can take out tax-free or not, which is a slightly different discussion.
That's very important, Vivek. And I guess one thing for people aged between 60 and 64, they often hear, oh, I can switch employers and that triggers a release to get my superannuation. Just one caveat though, especially for people in Catholic education, and I'm sitting here in the middle of the Sydney diocese. You can't go from one school in the Sydney diocese to another school in the Sydney diocese. It's the same employer. Even though it might be a different school, it's the same employer. But you could go from Sydney to Parramatta or Parramatta to Broken Bay or just switch diocese, and that would trigger the release to get access to your super. And I'll never forget one of these type of seminars we was actually doing face-to-face back in the good old days when we could do them face-to-face, Vivek. They're coming back soon, I hope. We'll be doing some face-to-face later in the year or in the next school holidays. But when we said you can get access to your super at 65, a gentleman said to me, did I hear you correctly? I'm 65 in a month's time. I'd love to pull out a portion of my money just to pay off my mortgage. I still plan on working for another few years after that. And he came in on his 65th birthday, took a small amount of his super out just to pay off his mortgage. So at the end of the day, it is your money, your flexibility to do with it what you like. But our planners can obviously assist you in planning what's best for your money, whether paying a mortgage off was the best thing or not, or it was just his own peace of mind. Everybody's circumstances are different there. We're coming on to contributions now, and when you contribute to superannuation, there are limits there on how much you can contribute. And there's two types of contributions. One is what we call the concessional contribution. Concessional contributions mean that they are taxed when they come into superannuation at 15% as opposed to your marginal rate. So concessional contributions are your employer contributions that go in. So your superannuation guarantee levy at currently at 10%, which has been for this current financial year. Any salary sacrifice amounts that you may put in along the way, you maybe have additional employer contributions going as an incentive. You may also want to make personal deductible contributions as well. The maximum you can put in on those types of contributions to all up is up to $27,500. That's just increased from $25,000 that increased back in July last year up to $27,500. Just got to bear in mind, that it is taxed at that 15%. Now, with the superannuation guarantee, for many years it was 9.5% for 7 years, from 2014 to 1 July 21 was 9.5%. We've had a very short period now of it being 10%, and then from 1 July 22, so a matter of 3 short months now, is going up to 10.5%, and slow over the next 2 or the next 3 years going up to 12%. So a fair bit of money is going to superannuation. Superannuation will more than likely be your second biggest asset, aside from your family home when you do retire. There are the other type of contributions that we do talk about as well, which are your non-concessional contributions. Non-concessional contributions means that they are not taxed when they come to superannuation. So to have that money in your bank account is through savings and other types of investments, and you've already paid tax on that. So when you make that contribution to superannuation, that is tax-free. And again, there are limits there on how much you can put in there. Now, people under 67, you can put in $110,000 a year, or you can also utilise what is called the bring forward rule and do 3 years worth of contributions up front and then nothing for the next 3 years. So you can put up to $330,000. It's very hard when I sit here in front of the computer talking to lots of our members at the moment. You can't see people's faces, but when I'm in a room and say that you can put up to $330,000 into superannuation, I get a lot of smirks and shakes of the head. Where am I going to get that type of money? What it's designed for is for people who have other investments. They want to sell those off and put that money into superannuation. They may come into some inheritance. They may downsize their home, although there's some new downsizing rules which Vivek will talk about in a moment. So they're the reasons that people may have that sizable amount of money to put into superannuation. Once you turn 67 to 74, you can put in up to $110,000 per year. There is a work test, and that work test simply says that you must work for 40 hours over 30 consecutive days at any time during the financial year. We often used to say, if you do a half a dozen casual days in July, there's your 40 hours, then you can put money into superannuation for the rest of the financial year. That particular rule is changing. From 1 July this year, there will be no work test. So you'll be able to put in that $110,000 into superannuation with no work test. So that's a great outcome for members who may have that money later in life and don't have to meet a work test to put that money into superannuation. However, the 75 and over, you can no longer put money into superannuation, and that rule isn't changing. There are other ways to contribute, such as the downsizer contribution and spouse contributions. Did you want to touch on those, please, Vivek?
Yeah, so the downsizer we have mentioned a couple of times now between Justin and me. It's relatively new, 2 or 3 years ago is when the government allowed us to do this. It's if you were to sell your home, and there's certain conditions attached to this. So it has to be a home you've owned for at least 10 years. And it used to be that you had to sell it after you were age 65. And if you met those and a couple of other conditions, you could each bring in $300,000 into super over and above all the other amounts that you were allowed to bring in. So it was a good way to have an incentive for people who didn't want to downsize because they were, they didn't know what that extra money would do sitting in the bank, but now there's a better option for it, so you can do the downsizer. There are a few interesting angles to the downsizer in the sense that you may sell your home and buy another property or a retirement home for the same amount of money, but that would still trigger your entitlement to bring other money, say something that you received from an inheritance or a sale of investment property or just money that you've had in term deposits in your bank into your super as well. So there are a few angles that can be explored there. And the rules around the downsizer are also changing as of 1st of July. They've reduced the age from when you're entitled to do this to age 60. So from 1st July, you don't have to wait till you're 65 to have sold your home. It's from age 60 on. The spouse contribution bit is more of a tax play in the sense that by making a spouse contribution, one of the members of a couple who's got a higher income can get a tax offset or reduction in the tax by contributing up to $3,000 to their spouse's super. Now, as with everything else to do with super, there are rules and conditions that have to be met by both persons involved, but it's something that we would consider as a part of a tax saving strategy, with the additional benefit, of course, of building up your spouse's super, although there are other ways to do that as well, called contribution splitting and all that, which gets a bit technical. So yes, a lot of options that are available to optimize outcomes for you.
And the other option there is also to consolidate as well. You may have multiple superannuation funds there. It may be a good idea to consider consolidating them all together. And that way you're only paying fees on one superannuation fund. But you may have insurance or other benefits with those other funds, so it may be worthwhile seeking advice before you do that. If you do choose to do it, it's very easy to do through the MyGov app. Many of us have got mobile phones with the MyGov app. If you go into the ATO section there, you just need to look for Australian Capital, your superannuation tab. It will list any superannuation fund that you do have, and then you can tick Australian Catholic Super as your primary fund, and then choose that the other funds you want to be rolled over to Australian Catholic Super to do that. And then the ATO, the Australian Taxation Office, send messages to those funds and rolls that money over. So it is very easy to do. But if you do have insurance with those other funds, give our call centre a call and they'll be able to assist you by transferring that insurance across first before you do anything with the money. I've got a question here that came in about the previous slide for some clarification. And just a reminder, there's been a number of people who have joined us since we did start today, Vivek. But if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to put them into the chat box or the Q&A boxes there, and we're monitoring those as we go through. But just want some clarification on the previous slide. And the question was, did you say that non-concessional contributions are not taxed under 110,000 as you've already paid tax on it? That's correct. So any non-concessional contribution that comes in under the $110,000 is not taxed. You've already paid tax on that to have that in your bank account, whether that is through savings from your work. So you've already paid tax on your income and you obviously save that money up. So when it comes into superannuation, that comes in tax-free. If you sold shares or something like that, you've already paid your capital gains tax on that personal through your personal income tax, so that we wouldn't tax that again when it comes into superannuation. So that's what I meant by that. I mentioned a couple of minutes ago now that there are some changes coming on from 1 July. Some of these changes have been announced some time ago, and some were just announced at the recent budget that we had only a matter of weeks ago. So the first point is for people who have an allocated pension and currently draw the minimum. The government has extended the 50% reduction of the superannuation minimum drawdown requirements for account-based pensions up until June 2023. For employers to pay that 10% SG contribution, you had to earn more than $450 per month for the employer to be obligated to pay that 10%. That $450 has now been wiped, so employers will now have to pay the 10% on all income, no matter how much you earn per month now. The SG contribution rate, as I touched on earlier, will be increasing to 10.5% for all employees. People aged 67 to 74 will no longer have to meet the work test to make those voluntary non-concessional contributions, which I spoke about a few moments ago. However, for this current financial year, you still need to meet that work test. So just remember that. The bring forward rule, that age limit will increase to under age 75. The minimum age to do a downsizer contribution that Vivek just spoke about will reduce from age 65 down to age 60. And then for our younger members, the first home buyers can now save up to $50,000 in deemed earnings to use as a deposit for that first home buyer. So Vivek, I guess we touched on this a few slides ago, so I don't think we'll go through this one again. There was a double up there about when you can genuinely access your retirement. You've spoken about that one already. Yeah.
Yep.
So how can you access your superannuation? There's really two ways: through a lump sum and through income streams. So did you want to touch on those, Vivek?
Yeah. So remember that once you've met a condition of release, the locks are off on your money. It becomes what's called unrestricted, non-preserved. There are no restrictions on it. Now, if you were to leave it in your super fund, you can access it as a lump sum, but a super fund is not an income stream, so you can't set it up to pay regular payments. If you wanted a regular payment sort of arrangement coming in, and also the goodness of tax-free earnings, then you would set up an income stream. The income stream is much more flexible than super in that not only will it allow you to have those regular payments coming in, being completely tax-free, but you can also access lump sums from it whenever you want it. So it's very flexible in that regard. So those are the two ways in which you can access your money. For most people, it makes sense to move as much of your money from super into an income stream when you can, because it's completely tax-free.
Great. And so moving that money, sorry about that, wasn't changing. So moving your super to the allocated pension or account-based pension now is really important to have all your money in your superannuation account. So your superannuation really is for your working life and really your transition to retirement life. So you get all your personal pre and post tax contributions into super. All those employer contributions need to be there. Any lump sum payments that you make along the way, government co-contributions that you may be entitled to, rollovers that you want to do from other funds into Australian Catholic Super, the downsizer contribution if you are eligible and want to do that, all need to be in superannuation. Once you've got them in ready, you then transfer it over and what we call rollover and start an allocated pension. Once you start an allocated pension, you can't add to it. So the only money going into the allocated pension will be the investment earnings that it makes along the way. And then you'll be having your regular pension payments come out, whether you choose to get that on a weekly, fortnightly, monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly or yearly basis. I think I've covered all our different frequencies there, as well as any lump sum payments that you wish to take out along the way. You may want to take a lump sum out to go on a holiday or buy a car, or I've got a question coming up later on about assisting family members. You may want to take a lump sum out to assist a family member. They're all the types of things that you can use your pension for. But going forward, you would do that through a transition to retirement allocated pension or a retirement pension. So I'll get Vivek to go through what a transition to retirement pension is, or for short, a TTR pension.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. So a transition to retirement pension is a sort of intermediate step between superannuation and a retirement pension. So the idea for it, from the legislator's point of view, was to provide a way for you to access some of your money, even if you're not fully retired and you don't meet a condition of release. So most commonly, this was used for people who were reducing the number of hours they worked and their income would then drop. But if they wanted to maintain their income, then they could create this transition to retirement pension and access some of it to top up their income. That was the purpose of it, the original purpose of it. But there are other things that it can be used for as well. The important thing is that it is limited in quite a number of ways. Firstly, you don't get a tax benefit by starting a TTR pension, although in the past you used to. So it's still taxed at 15% on its earnings like super is. So it's all about having access to your money. So what does that access come in use for? Well, of course, for the original intent of supplementing your reduced income, but it could also be used, for example, to maximize your savings by giving you extra income to salary sacrifice into super and then start saving more tax. There are limitations. You're only allowed to take up a maximum of 10% in a financial year. So every financial year, the maximum you can take out from it is 10%. And as long as you're over 60, the pension payments are tax-free. But if you're under 60 years of age, you can still start up a transition to retirement pension, because remember, you can start one at age 58 or 59 if you qualify, but there will be some tax on it. And it's a complex calculation, but it depends on the taxable component in that money, and it'll be taxed at your marginal tax rate with a 15% offset. So don't want to bamboozle you with all that stuff. That's my job to calculate those things for you. But just to be aware that it's a tool that's available in certain circumstances, and we would love to help you use it where it's suitable, but there are things that need to be thought through.
Thanks, Vivek. And then there's the allocated pension. And really, the allocated pension is very similar to the transition to retirement pension, isn't it? There's really only two main differences, or possibly three, actually.
Well, let me see if I can count up to three now, Justin. But well, the first difference is that when you have an allocated, and remember, none of these things happen automatically, except that a transition to retirement pension will automatically become allocated pension at age 65. But other than that, you have to actually move them. You have to take steps to move them across, and steps means forms and paperwork and all of that. But the allocated pension, as we've touched on a couple of times, is completely tax-free on its earnings. The allocated pension no longer has a limit on a maximum amount you have to take. So the minimums based on your age still apply for the transition to retirement as well as for the allocated pension, but there is no longer any maximum. So if you needed to take out a chunk of money, for example, to pay down your debt or to gift to your children because you've got a whole lot of other money that'll support your retirement spending, then you can. And the third thing, I think that, Justin, if you're counting still, is that payment comes out completely tax-free once you've got an allocated pension. So those are the main differences. So basically, it's the place you want most of your money in when you're retired. It's completely tax-free. It's flexible in its access because you can take lump sums as well as regular payments as replacement income. And importantly, you can invest it in a mix of assets that gives you a return that is better than what you might get at a bank. So you can aim for that return in line with how much risk you want to take, but you can certainly do better than what that money would do in a bank without too much additional risk. So that's really the best place to park your money in retirement, in my view.
Very good, Vivek. I was counting the three. I think you hit them all on the head. I was no maximum pension payment was the first one I had in mind. The second one was you can now take out lump sums where you can't do that in the TTR. And the third one is that the investment earnings are tax-free, the allocated pensions. So those are the three I was thinking of. So at Australian Catholic Super, we have two types of income streams or account-based pensions. The first one is the retire choice. Would you like to go through our two types, please, Vivek?
Okay, so the retire choice allocated pension is sort of a traditional allocated pension, if you will. There are investment options there that you can choose from, and you can change your mix as and when you want. Hopefully with some advice as to what is appropriate for your risk profile. We also have a retire smart pension where you don't actually have to make any choices once it's set up. The idea behind the retire smart pension is to provide you with a couple of years of very conservatively invested money, well, usually invested in cash, so very conservative. So that gives you a buffer from all the market movements that are going around, while the rest of the money sits in the growth fund. And whatever you earn from the money in the growth fund goes into the cash bucket, and the system is monitoring how much is building up in the cash bucket in relation to how much you need to draw out. Any excesses get put back into the growth assets, but your pension payments will always come out from the cash bucket. So the point is, it's like a no maintenance battery, if you will. Once it's set up, it keeps doing what it does in the way that it was set up to do, without you having to make adjustments and changes depending on market conditions. Which is not to say that you can't make changes. You can, but you don't need to if it is set up like this. It's a self-regulating, automated, providing you with security for the short term for the money that's coming out, while still getting you the growth engine from the growth fund to get you returns that will top up the cash fund.
Thanks, Vivek. And I think one of the most important things about financial planning is really to help our members and help the people you see understand if they can afford to retire and how long the money's going to last. So they're really the longevity of their investment savings that they've accumulated over their working life. And then you've got to throw into the mix unexpected events. Who would have thought COVID would be still around 2 years later? Who would have even thought about COVID in 2019? We hadn't even heard of it back in 2019. So they're all things that you've got to factor in retiring, and that's what you look at when you plan. Did you want to just run through some of the longevity things that you look at in the example?
Yep. So probably for a member that's retiring, the top questions are always, how much do I need to retire? Can I afford to retire? And how long will my money last? Which are all interconnected and linked. So one of the things we do with our retirement planning advice when we go through that comprehensive advice is to work out what would be the situation given what we understand of your spending needs and your eligibility for other sources of income, such as from the age pension. We project how long your money will last. And we also project not only what happens to your assets, how they decline, and in most cases it is declining. Remember, it's there to fund your retirement. So it's okay for it to decline. We just don't want it to go down too steeply. We want it to go down gradually so that it's there for your life expectancy and a bit more perhaps. But we also look at what would be the sources of your income as you go down your pathway into retirement, because initially you may not be able to get too much age pension because you have a lot of assets or you haven't reached the age yet. But as time goes by, as your assets go down in value, you are more likely to get a higher amount of age pension. So these sort of projections quantify this and put them in the form of a graph, which in my experience have been some of the most useful bits of visual information for our members, because it helps them understand exactly what is happening based on the assumptions we're making. So in this case study, we've got Mr. Gary and Mrs. Mary client, and we're saying they're 65 years of age. They've got a balance of $300,000 in super. They do own a home. They need $63,000 a year per annum, which is close to, if you remember, the comfortable lifestyle amount in the ASFA standard that we discussed early in this webinar. So it's a little under that, but close. To simplify things, there's no other super investments. There's no other investments outside of super. Inflation is running at 2.5%, and that means the rise in living costs is also running at 2.5%. They're invested with what we would consider moderate risk to earn 5%. And the figures that you see are not the value of the future amounts, because that has got inflation built into it, but in today's dollars. So present value means today's dollars, makes it very realistic, and for us to be able to understand what it means. So when we end up with the projection, you get two graphs. One of them is for what happens to your assets. So that graph, Justin, is this one. So you can see that they start up, and the print on this might be a little small, but you start up for Mr. and Mrs. Client with $600,000, and they're drawing down their $63,000 a year. But remember, they're also earning 5% on the earnings. So the money does decline, but gradually. And eventually, it runs out at age 91, I believe. It's a bit small on my side too. So that is quite a bit past the average life expectancy for even women who have a longer lifespan than men. So in a sense, there is enough money there to fund you to your life expectancy and beyond. As to the other part of that calculation is, where is the funding coming from as you go down that pathway into retirement? So the reddish bar, the top half of the bar, is money coming out from your sources, usually the income stream or allocated pension. And the blue bit is money coming from income support from Centrelink or the age pension. So you can see that initially the age pension is relatively less, but then it hits a maximum at in about the 5th or 6th year of retirement, maybe around age 67. And that means you reduce the amount of money you're drawing of your own. But a point comes at close to age 92, I believe, where when you've crossed 92, you've actually run out of most of your own money, and then you are dependent solely on the age pension. So there is a gap between that red line on top, which is the $63,000 a year that you would like to have to live on, and the $40,000, I think, that you're getting from the age pension. So, of course, in this case, you still have enough money till age 90 or 92, which for most people is good enough. But then I have clients who say to me, well, my parents are in their late 90s or in their hundreds. We want to plan for age 95. Well, this wouldn't work too well for them. So we've got to have a discussion on what we can do to get them there. But this is, in effect, quite a good outcome, I would suggest.
Thanks, Rebecca. It's a very good example, and just the benefits of how your retirement savings is only one part of what your retirement income will be, and the other part is the age pension, as long as you're eligible to get that. And when you look at the age pension, there are some assessment criteria that you must meet to qualify the age pension, such as you need to be of a certain age, currently 65 and a half. It is going out to 67 next year. Actually, it's 66 and a half at the moment. It's going out to 67 next year. You need to be an Australian resident. You must meet an incomes test and an assets test, and we'll touch on those at the moment. And then there'll be payment rates as well, which you'll be able to receive if you do qualify for that pension. It is very important to know the pension age, because Vivek spoke about it earlier, and I've spoken about getting access to your superannuation, and Vivek made the point, you can retire at any time, but you've got to be able to fund that. If you're funding that as a self-funded retiree, you may be able to supplement that. Look at that longevity slide we showed a little bit earlier with the age pension, and that won't kick in until 66 and a half now, or from 67 next year. So it's important to know when you do get access to it. So we say the magical age of 65 to get access to your super. That is the case when you're still working, but it's still not the case to get access to the age pension. Now, Vivek, one of the criteria is the assets test, and on screen there is the assets test for a single person. Did you just want to go through that and how that works?
Yeah, so for the age pension, Centrelink applies both tests, the asset test and the income test. And in the ways that government work, it's the one that gives you the least amount is the one that they will use. So whichever one trips you up is the one that you're going to focus on. So the asset test for the single person, and it's divided into two types of individuals, whether you're a homeowner or not. So you will get the maximum age pension if your assets are below $270,500. You will get your pension amount will start reducing from that point on if your assets are more than that. And when your assets are valued at over 599,750, your age pension cuts out completely, and you would then get no more age pension. That's for a single homeowner. If you don't own your home, the thresholds go up a bit, and you can go up to $487,000 to get the maximum entitlement for you. Starts reducing after that till you hit $816,000 and a bit $1,000, after which no age pension under the asset test. So the figures for the couple are obviously different. They're not exactly double that of what it is for a single, but it goes up. So the same, if you're a homeowner as a couple, you can have assets of up to $405,000 and you'll still qualify for the maximum age pension. And then it reduces to zero once you hit $901,500, after which no more pension. And for a couple, goes from for a non-homeowner couple, it goes from $621,500 for the maximum pension, reducing to nil once you've reached $1.1 million and a bit. So understand, though, that most people's assets do go down over time as you use up more of your money to fund your retirement needs. So your eligibility actually keeps increasing. And as long as you keep updating Centrelink with your current asset values, you will be entitled to the higher amounts.
And Vivek, if you meet the one of the assets tests, then you have to also meet the income test, as you said.
Yes. So the second criteria that Centrelink applies is the income test, and the income test is quite stringent as well. If you earn more than $180 a fortnight as a single person, up to that amount, you could still get the full age pension. But once you start earning more than that, your pension entitlement reduces and it cuts out completely when you've hit $56,000 a year, which is about $2,155 a fortnight. And for a couple, again, it goes up, but doesn't double. So you can earn up to $320 a fortnight with no reduction to your age pension. But once you go over that, there's a sliding scale, and your pension amount reduces until you've hit about $3,300 a fortnight when it cuts out altogether.
Great, thanks. Vivek. Just circling back to the assets test, we just had a question about that, and was does your superannuation count as an asset? Well, if you're a pension age, it does count as an asset. Essentially, everything you own counts as an asset except for your principal place of residence on that assets test. Now, in the conscious of time, we'll just quickly go through the pension rates, and we spoke about that much earlier when you spoke about the retirement standard. So that's for a single person, $25,677, and for a couple, $19,354 each, so $38,708 if you're eligible for a full pension. If you're unfortunately separated due to ill health, meaning one of you may be in a care facility and one's still at home, you would both get the single amount of that $25,677. There's also maybe eligibility for a Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card. Did you just want to touch on that one?
Yes, so a lot of people are not aware that even if they don't qualify for the age pension, there are other Centrelink benefits that they could qualify for. And the main one is the Commonwealth Seniors Healthcare card. The reason for that is the Seniors Healthcare card is tested not on assets at all. It's tested on income only, and the income threshold is quite high. It's $92,416 of taxable income for a couple, and $57,761 for a single. So most people in retirement would end up qualifying for it. The main benefits for it, well, the other conditions, of course, are the residency conditions. You've got to be a resident and you've got to meet that income test, and you need to be of age pension age. So you get it if you didn't get the age pension and the pensioner card that comes with the age pension. The biggest benefit of this, and this is quite valuable for people who have medical conditions or health issues, is that you pay the pensioner rate for your medications. So all PBS subsidized medications, script for them will cost you $42.50 if it was the full price in PBS, but you will get them for $6 and I think it's 50 cents or thereabouts. So significant reduction in your medical bills. You also have some specialists and GPs who might give you concessional rates for their services, but that's pretty much up to their discretion. It doesn't automatically get you that.
Thanks, Vivek. And also some states and territories have their own different incentives as well, such as discounted public transport. You may get some lower utility bills, so lower rates and bills and so on. Vivek, estate planning forms a very important part of retirement planning. Can you just talk about the estate planning that you would touch on when you meet with members?
Yeah, so the purpose of estate planning is thinking ahead to what happens when you're not there or you're not in a position to make decisions. And it's really, really important if you wanted to make control and make sure that things happen according to your wishes. We all probably know about wills and how important they are. And a will is what decides how your assets, which form part of your estate, will be distributed. Now, the important thing to remember here is that superannuation does not necessarily have to form part of your estate. Superannuation can actually bypass your estate by allowing you to nominate beneficiaries directly into your superannuation fund. So there are rules about who can be nominated and not, but that's one of the things that as a housekeeping thing, we try and make sure that we've taken you through the different types of nominations that you can make and have them in place so that it meets the requirements for you to have your wishes fulfilled the way you want them to. So the will obviously comes into place when you pass away, but the power of attorney is a document that comes into effect when you're still alive, but not in a position to make the decisions you need to. So it's a very powerful document, but it's a very important document as well, because who will have authority to make decisions about your assets and what needs to be done with them if you're not in a position to do it. So bears a lot of thinking about how you want to provide these authorities and how you want to distribute your assets. And the best people to help you with that are solicitors who specialize in this. We would, of course, take you through the concepts and what's important and what things to consider. And the beneficiary nominations we can help you with because they apply to your funds with us. But the powers of attorney and wills, we can, if you don't have solicitors that you can consult on your own, we will refer you to people that we regularly use who can help you with that decision.
Thanks, Vivek. And one of the other things that you can assist our members with is aged care planning as well, funding aged care. And aged care is really forming a very important part of financial planning now, especially for a lot of our baby boomer generation, looking after aged and elderly parents now as well. So that's something else you could assist with. Just want to touch on that briefly as well.
Yeah, so for a lot of our clients, aged care is a bit further down their horizons, but often it could be their parents, or people in the family that they might be concerned about. It's a very complex area, and it's certainly something that can have you running pillar to post to get all the information that's necessary. We can help you there because there are certain very important considerations to take into account in terms of how access to aged care can impact with your other Centrelink entitlements. The rules for assessing assets and income are different for aged care, and it is really important to see how making decisions in the aged care area can affect your other benefits, and there's lots of considerations to be taken into account. So definitely a complex area, but we do provide aged care advice for our members if one of the partners needs it, or of course, if other members in the family need it. It goes down to finding the best way to fund it and what assets to use to fund it, while still maximizing, or at least not jeopardizing, your normal Centrelink entitlements now and in the immediate future.
Thanks, Vivek. And really, the way that you assist members really is just a summary of what you've touched on through today's seminar, isn't it, or webinar? You assist them saving money for their retirement and so on, maximising Centrelink, how long your money will last in retirement, goals that they may have, what they want to do with that money in retirement. We just touched on it then, estate planning. You also, I think, one important thing that a lot of members don't realise is that you can provide advice on non-superannuation related investments and strategies. Did you want to touch on that?
Yes. So as licensed financial planners, we do have the ability to advise you on non-super investments as well. And there are things such as investment funds or annuities, which might be suitable for some members depending on their goals, but also things like managed funds. This morning, I had a discussion with a member couple who have kept a lot of their money in super because they don't want the minimum payments from their pension coming out for the full amounts, because that'll end up with too much money going in the bank. But we talked about other alternatives. The benefit of keeping the money in a pension would help them tax-wise. And any surpluses that come out, we have other recommendations we can help them with that will invest that money in a similar way to superannuation to get them better returns than they would get in the bank. So we start off with a helicopter view of what is possible to do and where your goals and objectives are. But then we come down to a lot of nitty-gritty stuff on all these different parts that can lead you to a better place financially now and in the long term, so that you're meeting your goals with a plan in place that reduces, it gives you peace of mind, basically. So yes, there's lots of things that we can take into account that sometimes you may not think that we do in normal financial planning meeting.
Thanks, Vivek. And I guess the other important thing is also to remember, when you seek advice, you will seek it together as a couple, because you are retiring together. You should plan to fund that retirement together. So we often get asked, well, my spouse or my partner isn't a member of Australian Catholic Super, they've got their money elsewhere. You can provide advice to all family members, can't you, and assist?
Yes, absolutely. So,
right. So how else can we help? When you contact the fund, we can give you 3 different levels of advice. The first one is general information, and that's where I can assist you and give you general factual information about your account. We can help you complete forms, give you account information. Once you say to me, oh, I've got my money in the balanced portfolio, should I put that in a shares portfolio? That's bordering on that's advice. I can't give that to you. That's when we would refer you to what we call our limited advice team. And our limited advice team just help you on single topic issues. Did you want to touch, Vivek, on what the LA guys do?
Yes. So the limited advice team will be able to give you advice over the phone or in a Zoom meeting if you want, but it is restricted to decisions you can make within the fund. That is the restriction to it. So they can talk to you about your options with contributions, about your investment options, about your insurance arrangements, and review one or all of those. And they can also talk about, in a very restricted sense, about transition to retirement. The first 3 topics, advice is provided at no additional cost to you because it's covered by the fees you're already paying. For transition to retirement, there is a small fee payable, but again, it's for a very specific set of circumstances, but they can help you with that over the phone or via Zoom meeting, and generally very, very speedily. It's usually beginning to end in less than a week.
Right, and then as you said, Vivek, that is at no additional cost for the first 3 of those. Yes. The next one type of advice is comprehensive advice. Did you want to run through the comprehensive and what you look at, but also I have a question about that as well, what the cost of comprehensive advice is. So maybe also touch on the cost of that as well when you're talking about that, please.
Yeah, so comprehensive advice is where you want a much more detailed and holistic look at your options, and not necessarily restricted to your options within the fund, but we could also be looking at alternatives available to you outside Australian Catholic Super. So all of the discussions we've had so far, and all of the things that are we talk about in the limited advice can also be dealt with here, or with a bit more detail into it. So contributions, building up your savings for retirement, what's the best way to do it, helping you access every possible benefit that you're eligible for, doing the retirement projections and assessment, showing you how long your money is going to last. And if there's enough to make it last, then looking at your options as to how to invest it. Or if there's not enough based on our initial projections, what are the things we can do now that over the next few years can help you get there? So this comes about after looking at your goals now in the medium term and the long term. And of course, the estate planning boxes that need to be ticked that set you up to have to make sure that your intentions are implemented and in your control, rather than other people making those decisions for you. So it can be with money that you have in super, can be with money outside of super, and a couple of quite specialized alternatives like investment funds and annuities, which are also available for different scenarios. So pretty much everything that is involved in looking at your financial options and your financial future is what we can deal with in comprehensive advice. Now, Justin has put me in a bit of a spot as to what the fees might be, because the way we work is that we have that first initial meeting. Well, before that, we ask you to do a bit of homework for us, which of course our members, who many of them are teachers, they love. We ask you to fill up a questionnaire and send it to us. We call it a needs analysis guide, and also ask you to think about your budget. We set up that first meeting, which is a way for us to assess what is it that you want to do and how you're thinking about your goals for retirement and what we can do to assist. There is no charge for that meeting, but at the end of that first part of the meeting, we have a good idea of what are the things we can help you do that will add value to your situation for now and for the longer term. And that may involve implementing a certain number of strategies. So it could be as simple as just looking at your investment options and making some salary sacrifice arrangements until retirement, or it could be much more complex, looking at multiple ways of reducing tax for you, for your estate, and all of that. So at the end of that meeting, we would quote you a cost for, or a fee for the advice if you want to go ahead. And the important thing here is that the advice then depends on the complexity of the strategies and the number of strategies that we are offering. I would say in my experience that most very simple pieces of advice would come in at about the $1,200 to $1,500 mark for people. Changes if you're a couple, but it can go up to $3,000 or $3,500 for more complex strategies, and very occasionally a little bit more than that. But the important thing to remember is you don't commit to any of this until we've had that discussion, and then you have an opportunity to consider, because as a financial planner, it is my job to make sure that I can demonstrate to you the value of doing what we are suggesting is possible. And if there is value in it, the fees will actually become, will seem or should seem quite reasonable to get that value that we are adding, hopefully. So you don't have to make a commitment until the end of that meeting. And at that point, you could say, well, nice to know all this. Thank you for your time, but we'll think about it and come back. Or you could say, well, yes, we're ready to go ahead. And then we do the second bit of the meeting where we go a little bit more of a deep dive and get information from you that'll help us give you that written financial plan.
Great, thanks, Vivek. We have gone over time, so I'll just quickly go through the next part of our webinar. Let's say we've got a minute or so to go before we get to questions. The member portal, I strongly recommend members log on to our member portal and It's a great tool there. When you go into our member portal, you can look at your up-to-date balance. You can make contributions. You can find, as I said, your balance. You can change your investment options through the portal. You can work out on how much insurance you have. You can increase it or decrease it if you wish. And you can update your non-binding beneficiaries and many other things there on our portal there. So what can you do right now? Well, you can, it's most important to take action. Log into the portal, look at your account, as we said at the very start, see how much money you've got. Speak to your local regional manager. Talk to our financial advice team. We're all here to assist you. The Australian Catholic Super, that's our mantra, is that we want to assist our members and keep them as well informed as possible. And to do that, you can call our 1300 number and speak to our call centre on 1300 658 776. Our call centre work Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. during the non-daylight saving months, and during daylight saving, it's 8 till 8 to ensure that they're here for our friends in the West to answer our members in the Western Australia up until 5 o'clock their local time throughout the year. They're also open from 9 till 5 on a Saturday as well. If you've got some questions on a Saturday that you think of, please feel free to call our call centre. A lot of the information that Rebecca and I have gone through is on our website, catholicsuper.com.au. If you've got a question that you don't want to get on the call centre about, you can also email us at fundoffice@catholicsuper.com.au, as well as our social pages there as well. We're through Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn there. Now, that comes to an end. We've still got a lot of people online, and there was still about 8 to 10 questions we haven't got through. Some are personal. Vivek, I might just touch on a few of them just very quickly if people want to stay online. Otherwise, feel free to drop off, and we'll be sending you a feedback form later on this afternoon. But the first one was, how are pension payments affected if only one person in the couple is a pensioner? Did you want to touch on that one, Vivek, please?
Sorry, what was the question again, Justin?
Yeah, sorry. How are pension payments affected if only one person of the couple is of a pension age?
Okay, so the assessment that is done by Centrelink is based on your joint assets and income. So the assessment is always as a couple, but as long as one of the members meets the eligibility criteria, they would qualify for the pension. What often happens is that if one of the members is retired and has met the pension age criterion, but the other person, even though they might have met the pension age criterion, are still working, then the income of the working partner can often rule out a pension, or at least reduce your eligibility for the pension. So importantly, it's your assets and income as a couple that count towards the Centrelink calculations, but depending on that, you might still be eligible for a small pension while the other partner is still working, and then the bigger pension once both are retired.
This one here is probably leaning towards personal advice, but I'll just get maybe a holistic or a general answer to this one, please, Vivek. Sure. I'd like to help my son a little financially. Is it better, this member says they're over age 65, but still working, to do the payout from my super or use their money in a bank account?
Yeah, so again, the question of is it better is an advice question. So let's keep it very general as to what your options are. So as we've talked about, money in a bank is not earning a lot in today's interest rate environment. It's very accessible and easily accessed to make the payment. Super is money that is concessionally taxed, has taken a lot of effort over years to build up, and is eventually headed to an even better place called an allocated pension, which could be tax-free. So potentially you might want to keep that money for your future retirement needs if you have access to other money that doesn't have all those goodies attached to it. So those are the options I'd be looking at, unless there were good reasons to not use the money that you have sitting in the bank. You might have other commitments, for example.
Thanks, Vivek. And the other question, very similar lines, I guess, bordering on advice. If you go a long service leave payout, where is it best to place it? So I guess they're asking in a bank account or into super.
Yeah, well, there are multiple options. So you could put it in your bank account, and again, interest rates being what they are, you're not going to earn a lot for it, but it does have the advantage of being absolutely secure, easily accessed, and available to you at short notice. If you put it into super, your the longer term benefits are that it'll be in a tax advantage place, is going to likely be able to earn more depending on how you invest it, and could eventually go to form part of the amounts that you can bring into a pension. Remember, you can't bring money into a pension unless it's first in super. So that's the longer term approach with the money in super. The big disadvantage for people who are not yet of preservation age is, of course, that putting it into super locks up the money until you retire. So you've got to weigh up those things and see what's appropriate for you. If you don't want to see that money locked up for the next 5 years, let's say, then obviously you might want to keep it accessible. You can keep it accessible in a bank account, but there are other ways to invest it so that it's still accessible while still earning something for you. And this is not to even talk about, if there are other needs for that money. You might have debt that's outstanding. Is it better to use that money to pay off your debt that you have, rather than invest it into super? So those are things that we weigh up, and we help you think through the pros and cons of it so that we can arrive at a decision that meets your objectives.
Thanks for that. The next question is probably going to be quite a detailed response, but I'll get you just to touch on it and we'll reach out to the member directly. Sure. About the carry forward. The question is, can you still make concessional contributions over and above the limit by using unused portion from previous years?
Short answer to that is yes, but as with everything with super, it's complicated. So there are lots of conditions and rules. The main one being that your super balance has to be below a certain amount on the 30th of June. I think it's $500,000. So your balance has to be less than $500,000 in the previous year. But if you meet that condition, you can go back to as far back as the 2018, 2019 year and carry forward those contributions if it is worthwhile. Note all the conditions I'm putting on this. Just because you can put X amount of money into super at the concessional doesn't mean it's beneficial for you. Beneficial means that you're going to pay less tax doing it this way than by not doing it. So if you can put in $50,000 now, but you don't have income of an amount that putting in $50,000 will help you save tax in, it's not worthwhile just because you can do it. So there's a few different things that need to be weighed up. But coming back to the short answer, yes, you can carry forward under the new rules, subject to meeting some conditions.
Thanks, Vivek. Another question for you. This just goes back to our longevity calculations earlier on. Do we have an example of the same sort of calculation for a single person that we can share? Not available as of just now, I guess, Justin, is the answer. Yeah. But I'm not aware if there's any collateral on your team that can be accessed. But the main, I think one of the good things there is done as a couple. I think the main reason it's done as a couple is for Centrelink calculations. That's right, yeah. But if a member sees you do those and they go ahead with advice, you do those type of projections. Of course. So if you come in as a single person, then all the calculations for you, your Centrelink entitlements, will all be done as a single person, and you will get a single person version of those graphs for sure. Right. So remember, that is just an example. It's not typical and not certainly not specific to any individual circumstance here. Yeah. And the last question that we'll do this today is, I turned 75 in May, so happy birthday for next month. And have retired. At the moment, I'm receiving or exhausting my long service leave until early July 2023, so another year. Can I still make an extra contribution until the end of April? I guess the short answer is, well, you are technically not retired because you are still being paid long service, so you are still considered to be employed. So you're under 75, so before your 75th birthday, you would be able to make that contribution.
Yes, so you've met the work test, so you're eligible until age 75. I believe the actual rule says until 28 days after the end of the financial year in which you turn 75. So we might need to double check on that, but that's my understanding. So
you can definitely do it before you turn 75. In the next,
you can do that before you turn
couple of
75
days.
for sure.
Yeah.
But you can do that.
Thank you very much, Vivek, and thank you for our members for coming along and giving up part of their Thursday afternoon. We really appreciate you attending today's session. As I mentioned a few times throughout today, we'll send a survey out to you later on this afternoon. Please complete that. It allows us to improve these webinars going forward. And thank you very much. And Vivek, thank you for a lot of that information. That was very useful. And as I mentioned at the start, this was live streamed on Facebook. So if you missed anything and wanted to see a recording of that, it is on our Facebook page. And also it will be on our YouTube page through our web page probably in the next 24 to 48 hours. So thank you, Vivek.
Yeah, thank you, Justin, and members. I hope you found it useful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.